injuries. Now, in any other workplace, would that be acceptable?
No, that's a shocking statistic you just given us, and it also tells me that if you're on notice about the prospect of it, if there is a protocol in place about the handling of weapons, what is the impact, Richard, of knowing the potential for danger? I mean, it's one thing to have a protocol in place for non-dangerous activities, but is there a separate or additional requirement under the law or a way to evaluate it if you're talking about inherently dangerous activities?
Excellent point. This is why I know we're speaking lawyer to lawyer here. Yes, of course, when it's inherently dangerous instrumentality like a gun, the standards are definitely different. It's not a pen. It's a gun. If not used properly, not secured properly, it can obviously maim or kill someone. So, yes, there are definitely different standards. And it just seems to me that now we're talking about a gun, but if we were on in another workplace, let's say I do a lot of construction accidents, some terrible accidents happen here in New York City, and there are so many protocols in the construction industry because it's so inherently dangerous. You're 20 stories up. There are big holes. There are craters there to fall. You could fall into the street. You have to be secured. Well, there's a lot of great protocols, but they're only as good as the people that are following them, meaning the forepersons and the supervisors. Just like here on the set, it is absolutely analogous to a movie set because a movie set is a workplace with dangerous conditions.
That's important to remember. It's a workplace. So how does insurance come into play here? The idea of how much you insure a set, or the ideas that would introduce in the civil liability context.
Sure. So in the case that obviously will be brought here by the family for damages for both her pain and suffering because she did not die immediately based on the reports and her wrongful death, the damages here they're horrible, obviously, because of the fact she left a child. She has a large earnings capacity, the grief of the family, the loss of guidance of the child. All of these will be considered in the case. And, I think what people don't understand, I think the general public says, oh, there's insurance, they'll pay for it. Okay. I wrote a book called Why Insurance Companies Hate When You Hire a Lawyer, and I'll tell you why. They hate it because I know what the general public doesn't know, which is, number one, they often fight cases tooth and nail. That's why you need trial lawyers like me, because we have to take cases to trial more times than you would think. And number two, so what's going to happen here is there'll be lawsuits filed. They'll be filed against the production company. Maybe Alec Baldwin is producer, not as actor, but if he had an active role in the production. Obviously, the armorer and the assistant director allegedly handed it over, and the film company. They'll likely all be part of a civil lawsuit. So insurance companies, there'll be liability insurance for everyone, and the insurance companies will hire lawyers to defend. And they just don't roll over and pay out a settlement. It will likely be litigated, depositions, investigation, and eventually they'll come to a point where they either want to offer settlement or their case will go to trial and a jury will decide it. So it will probably be a drawn-out process. And I don't know if you recall, there was a case in 2014. It was horrible. There was a movie called Midnight Rider, and it was being filmed in Georgia. And they decided that it was a good idea to have a scene on a railroad track where they were putting a metal bed over the railroad track. And you can't believe this, but they did not get permission from the railroad to do this, from the movie company, and a train came. They didn't expect the train to come. I don't know why. They didn't read the schedule, but it was horrible. A train came. Everybody ran. A train hit the bed. Shrapnel from the train hit this 27-year-old assistant camera person, hit her, and then threw her into the oncoming train, and she died. This was absolutely horrible. And that's a case where actually, besides obviously the civil case, that's a case where there were two guilty pleas on both involuntary manslaughter and trespass, and one person decided to try the case, the criminal case, and she was the first assistant director, and she actually got convicted at the trial. And then in the civil case, as I'm saying about insurance companies, well, everybody settled out except the company that was the train operator, very big corporation. And they decided that the train operator wasn't responsible, which obviously you have an obligation to see what's in front of you, and you see a metal bed at some distance, you have a certain braking distance that you should
if you can stop,
seeing
right?
this. Right. So the insurance company obviously decided, no, we'll try the case. And the jury said, you know what? You are 35% liable. There may be other parties who already settle out liable. And the jury said that it's $11.2 million, and then when it was on appeal, it was settled. So when you hear insurance, it doesn't mean, we're just handing over money. Not at all, and that's the case that certainly should have been settled by the train company, but they didn't until it was ready on appeal.
And remind people how does the jury make the determination about the percentage of blame?
Yes, excellent. So a jury decides all the facts in the case. The judge talks about the law, the jury decides the facts, and they simply go into that room and they say, boy, what percentage do I think each of the parties were at fault? And it's totally within their province. They all sit there and discuss it. I have it in every one of my cases. And I have to say, almost all the time, they come out with something that's very reasonable. And how they get to it? It's a good question. I ask them these things all the time. It's usually some type of compromise they come up with among themselves. But the jurors that I've had in New York City over more than 3 decades, they really try hard and they really take it seriously, and they do an excellent job.
Richard C. Bell, we have so much ahead of us still as they unpack the facts of this case, and we learn more and more about what's going on. But you and I both know the idea if nothing's off the table, that's everything's on the table. So
everything's on the table.
That's how you,
exactly right.
You know. But it doesn't necessarily mean, and again, criminal liability and prosecution, you could very easily not have criminal prosecution, but it does not have the impact to foreclose civil remedies at all. And that's an important point for people to realize. What the prosecutor might do in a criminal context or choose not to do in a criminal context, because there is just not the the evidence there to support the claim. And in New Mexico, there's also an excusable homicide statute that talks about the idea of, if the person's engaged in otherwise lawful behavior and by accident or misfortune causes the death of the other person, they talk about the standard of care and the duty of care and acting reasonably. But if they don't have, if that's on the books for the criminal side, you can be sure that the civil liability is still on the table regardless.
Yes, in New Mexico, they have comparative negligence. It means, different parties can be blamed differently. And I think what people need to remember is, because this always came up years ago, OJ, they charged, they acquitted, and then there was the wrongful death trial, the civil trial, where there was a judgment against him to pay money. So we got to remember, in the criminal sector, it's beyond a reasonable doubt. And in the civil liability, you have to find a preponderance of the evidence, which is just a teensy-weensy bit over 50% to find someone liable.
Wow. Good reminder and good context to give us all. Richard C. Bell, thank you for your time. As always, you can go learn more about him at his firm website, richardcbellesq.com. He's also the author of the book Voting, The Ultimate Act of Resistance. You've seen him on CBS and CNBC and NBC, ABC, and more. And he brings us the insight on civil liability as well. Richard C. Bell, thanks for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Laura. Sorry it's such a tragic topic today, but I appreciate you inviting me.
I'm glad you were here. Thank you. We'll be right back after a quick break here on SiriusXM POTUS.